Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
With an ever-increasing demand for potassium due to increasing crop yields, there is a need for a better source of potassium with improved availability and uptake potential. Alpine K-Tech is the most plant-available form of potassium and is able to enter the plant quickly and easily. As a foliar application, K-Tech is tank mixable with many crop protection products, thereby increasing the grower's resource use efficiency. K-Tech offers balanced fertility and an added energy source for the plant. The latest development of premium crop nutrition is doing a lot more with a lot less for your crops. Learn more at www.alpinepfl.com.
Hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. I am so excited to have you guys back this week. We are going to be speaking to Kelly Dobson. Welcome. We are bringing Kelly back for one of two episodes that we're doing together. One episode we focused on the farm CEO and the importance of becoming the CEO in your farm operation. Now, this week, we're going to be speaking about the National Farm Leadership Program that Kelly is launching. So, ready to go?
I am.
Excellent. Before we dive in and start talking about today's topic, can you tell our audience a little bit more about you?
Sure. So I'm a fourth generation grains and oilseeds farmer from Manitoba, farm out of the southwest corner. And I've had a lifelong interest in what turned out to be leadership. And I decided to go back to school about 5 years ago, get a graduate degree. And that's when I really got my eyes opened and sort of realized that I started to see a lot of what was going on in agriculture from this lens of leadership and what opportunity was out there, and that there was a real opportunity to increase success of farms in many different ways, and really in any way you want to measure it. There was a real opportunity there, and I got to see some of the challenges from that, and that's what got me into it. And I started realizing that this was something else I wanted to do, and LeaderShift was born. So
excellent. And you work with farmers and coach farmers? Yeah,
the focus is on LeaderShift is definitely a small business executive coaching and development business, but I would say we have an ag space focus, and that's simply because that's what I know is where I live and work, and truthfully, it's what I care about most.
Excellent. Perfect. So tell me and our audience more about the National Farm Leadership Program. I'm excited.
Sure. So the National Farm Leadership Program, it's actually a joint venture between LeaderShift and Farm Management Canada. Farm Management Canada is Canada's national nonprofit, and they've been focusing on farm business management for probably, I think decades, and they've got unbelievable amounts of resources. I actually had Heather Watson, who's the executive director. I had her on the advisory program when we actually reviewed it, when we started moving on, and so we developed a bit of a relationship, and she approached me and said, I think this is something that should go national. It should be something that should be available to everybody. And so I was certainly sort of pleased by that, and was certainly looking for the partnership and the awareness, and so the leadership program has morphed into this title of National Farm Leadership Program, and it sets out to provide across the country to anybody in the ag space, so not just farmers, but anybody who's in the ag space, an opportunity to take really professional executive development at a really CEO mindset level, leader development, in a way that is accessible, in a way that I think most programs are not. And that's the part that excites me the most, is that so often, because of the gaps and the distances that we live from major centers, it can be really, really challenging to get a program of any kind of depth and substance, and be able to keep a business running. That's probably the number one reason why people don't do things, is they'll say, I don't have the time, or it's travel, and we still even run into it with our program, because we still have a residency. So I was able to design something that was able to deliver that, and so people can actually do it while they're working inside their business. So if you're on a busy schedule, it's still something that could fit, and it's still accessible. So, which
works perfect for farmers, because I think anyone out there would say, I don't have the time.
Number one resistance we get is people say, I think it's a great idea. After they don't scoff, they will absolutely say, it's a great idea, but I'm just too busy. And the number one thing that we find with people is that when they actually increase their leader effectiveness, they still say they're busy, but they're a lot more productive. And actually, I noticed in the early parts of the program, people were coming in and they weren't. We have a text. but they weren't necessarily reading the book. And so that was actually hurting their performance. So we actually, what I did is I ended up audio casting all of the major chapters through the book, all of the chapters through the book, into the themes of what we talk about through the program. And so the beauty of that is that people, if you're going to the rink, if you're going back and forth to work, or on the tractor, you can actually consume the content week by week and participate. Then you can be in a community of people together, but you can do it on your own schedule. Perfect. And that's the cool part. So if you're a person that likes to do it early in the morning, that's your best time, or if you got someone, if you're a weekend or an evening person, it all works. And you're actually able to participate together, but you can do it on your own schedule. Because it's really about joining. It's not unlike a Twitter or a Facebook. You can post in, people can see what you're doing and how your thoughts and ideas around what the curriculum is doing, and you can be together. And you can be together that way. And then we get together for an actual residency in March, which is the exciting part, because that's in Sydney by the Sea on Vancouver Island. So it's one of the warmest places in Canada that time of year. It's a 10-minute drive from the international airport, so there's no crazy 45-minute jaunt. From once you get off the plane, we pick you up at the airport and deliver you. So we provide all the ground transportation, and that has got amazing international connections. WestJet has, I think, something like 7 flights a day out of there. So we can get anyone from the last day. We can get them all the way into Toronto that evening. So from a connectivity standpoint, it actually made a lot of sense to put it there, and I really love it. It's a great place to work and develop leadership skills for a residency. So
excellent. One
more thing. Yeah. Once that all's done, once all of that is done, we also provide unlimited executive coaching for a year.
Okay.
And that's that's I think a major differentiator between the National Farm Leadership Program and our program, because what we find is that if we're really talking about performance, it's really about what people can integrate in practice. Like, in other words, what people actually do when they get out. And so in order to get that going, it takes time and it takes support to do that. So we by nature, I just said, it'd be easier just to chop it off in 3 months. But what we know is that if we're really looking at increasing performance, we need the extra time and support. So we provide unlimited executive coaching. So that means I'm taking calls at 9 or 10 o'clock at night if necessary.
Okay.
And we have monthly group coaching so that people can get together back in the community and talk about how they're progressing. So it really becomes that sort of a community of practice around leader effectiveness. It's not about working on businesses, it's working on myself, so when people go back into their businesses, they're more effective.
I love it. So I'm going to take a step back. Earlier, as we opened the episode,
sure,
we mentioned our other episode and interview together, the Farm CEO. So if you guys have not watched that one already, I would recommend to watch that one in conjunction. So have a look for that wherever you watch and listen to this show. I almost want to step back a little bit. You've told us about the show. I want to step back to the importance of this leadership idea a little bit. I mean, we did a full 40-minute episode on this, so catch that. But I think to do your program justice, we might want to go back there and touch on this.
Yeah, I think it's important because...
Why is that important, right?
Well, in an elevator pitch, I would say, because leadership actually matters. And it's not matters because I think it's important. It's because it is an unbelievably rigorously studied field. And they're putting a lot of resources into actually measuring, like, what are people really doing that are driving results? And they actually can measure it qualitatively and quantitatively. And so in other words, we know what behaviors are working, but we also know what the impact of those behaviors are. And what we know is that in any data set or in studies that have been done, if you happen to be in the top end of that group, so if you're a very top end and are considered to be a very highly effective leader, there's a really good chance that you could be having extraordinarily better results than the average.
Okay.
It's not linear. And this is the part that really matters, because we know when we put all this rigor together, we can actually increase performance. And so, and this fits in a situation where, because we know going forward, 2 generations ago, Tracy, so much of the challenge in agriculture was really about technology. It was about getting tools and resources that would actually work, the right genetics, the right kind of equipment, and being able to put it all together in a way that would generate results. Now it's, well, how fast do you want to go? How big do you want it? What color would you like it? There's just all kinds of technological solutions to these challenges, and not just in the production side, but even when we talk about legal and financial, there is just unbelievable amounts of support for that. It's in looking more like all the time, and this is in the broad context, but it's true in agriculture, I think, especially, The limiting factor that's showing up is actually how people manage all of that complexity and all of that opportunity for maximum benefit. And increasingly it's, I got too much choice. I just like, what do I do and how do I do it and how do I put it all together? And there's all these moving parts and I don't have all the answers because it's way more complex than what it used to be. So I'm having to work with experts and I'm having to have these high level complex conversations to try and keep things working together for that result that we're really looking for. And sometimes the best results are the ones you never thought, like the ways or approaches we never thought we'd ever do on our farm, and suddenly it's the thing that's really driving some major benefit. That all has to be glued together by the farmer themselves. Like, leadership is not something that can be outsourced.
Self-leadership, the farmer, leadership of ourselves.
And then with others, yeah, and it starts with self. And that's the part I think that is the missing link, is that so often, and I see this even in business development, business plans, people will leave themselves out of the plan.
Okay.
They got a great plan, and it's like, and how are you going to do that? And they're like, well, and they don't realize, like, do you have all the skills necessary to get all those parts off the ground and keep them in motion and working collectively? And so this is and it's very common. This is not an ag thing. This is a human condition thing. We're purpose built to look outward for opportunities and threats and to see stuff. We struggle. It takes real effort to actually see ourselves in the problem, but it can be trained. And this is the part that is becoming the thing that's surfacing as being really important. As much as all the tech is out there and all that, what we're finding now is that human systems, how I operate and how I interact with you and others, supports our ability to leverage all of this great opportunity. And we got to have both.
I love it, and correct me if I'm wrong in the way I'm going to summarize this. You just said we have so many options in the machinery and the genetics and the inputs and all of that stuff, and that's been the focus for so long, but our businesses are getting so big and so complex. The farmer is the X factor in our ability to summarize, to lead ourselves and be aware of what we know and don't know, and then also to be able to lead others. Is that right?
Yeah, because what it comes down to, like the word leadership is just, has such a broad text. And when I do
that word scares me. That's why I try and bring it down to one person.
Yeah, because the part about this is that, like, unfortunately that's what the literature calls it. So we'd have to call it something else, and then we wouldn't be we wouldn't be in alignment.
Yeah.
But if you really want to know what I'm talking about, I'm talking about the effect of the ability to step into consequence. And that means usually high risk, high pressure, where what I say or do next has irreversible potential upside or consequence, like negative consequence. And when I do that, I'm showing up as my best self, not the self that I wish I hadn't shown up as. And that gap between the way I showed up and the way I would like to show up, that gap is what we're trying to close. We're not only trying to close that, but we're actually trying to elevate it this way, because invariably what happens is that when we get under too much pressure, too much stress, our performance decreases. We know this to be true, right?
Absolutely.
Well, the thing is, we can actually be proactively train and develop ourselves so that we are much more in control of how we show up and how we perform and how we think and how we behave. And this is what then leverages all of the stuff that we've invested in, all the risk, all the partnerships, and we can actually get it to happen. And that isn't accidental. Like, this is the part that, here's the dirty secret. This takes practice. Like, we didn't become a national force in curling and hockey the way we currently train leaders.
Right.
We don't put kids in a classroom and put up a little fake rink on there and show whatever, and they get to hand the hockey stick around and go, okay, well, good luck out there. And a lot of leader development is a lot like that, but it takes actual practice, and we have to be in a practice all the time. And it's something we integrate in minutes a day, and with larger, more in-depth periods throughout our year or throughout the years. This is what I'm talking about. And it kind of starts, as I've decided, it starts with the National Farm Leadership Program, significantly, because it is one of those things because to get into a practice, and a practice that's relevant to me, that actually works for what I'm trying to work on, is where all the possibility comes from. It's like you can't crack out a book and then just say, well, there's very, very low evidence that actually shows up as higher performance. It's not just about knowledge. Knowledge is super important, but it's what I can integrate in behavior and figuring out what that most means for me.
I love it.
It's very individualized, and that's a part I emphasize, is that as much as the program has content and criteria, the whole objective of it all, very, very quickly, like from the very first conversation, is trying to figure out what of myself, if I were to identify and focus on over the next year, would substantively increase my performance that could potentially translate into increased business performance. If I did that and put my focus on that, what might be possible?
Ooh.
And that is, there's ways of doing that. Like we have a very rigorous way of figuring that all out. Like that, there's rigor to this. There's ways of doing this that actually have been shown to work. Okay. And so that's what we're trying to bring in and make it accessible right to the farm.
You led me right where I want to go next. I want to set the stage for the leadership program. Now let's talk a little bit about the program.
Sure.
The path.
Yeah, okay. So for the typical person who comes into the program, it usually starts with a phone call or an email to me. They've expressed interest. We'll arrange typically a Zoom conference, so we get to see each other. Sometimes it's face-to-face, but more times than not, it's over a Zoom conference. And we'll have a brief meeting, and it's really kind of talking about, why are we having this conversation? What are you thinking about? What is your context? And if you were to think about where you'd like to be in a year that would really make a world of difference for you and for your business, what would that look like? And that's the first kind of, what are we talking about? And then and through that conversation, we kind of figure out whether or not this is a right fit right now. People have questions about what the program is like, and that's where it starts. And then usually the next one is we have an intake questionnaire, so we get to know a little more about you. I'll send the textbook across. Course fees are paid, and then we get started. Getting started starts in January, and we'll join all together through a first Zoom conference where we'll actually meet each other in person, and we'll take a week for everybody to get familiar with the Leader Lab. The Leader Lab is our proprietary learning management system that's password protected.
Okay.
So in other words, it's a space where we hold all the content and the knowledge, and we hold the community virtually so that you can be on your farm, but you're also, when you lift the lid of your laptop or you flip your phone open, you're also inside of a classroom and a community.
Nice.
And there's people in there talking away or have left information, and you're consuming, you're interacting back and forth. We do that for about 6 weeks. And through that first part is, there's a little bit of information, we have some content, so we understand what we're really talking about, this notion of trying to get this really, really complex thing into something that, okay, what are we really talking about? And that's usually starts the eyelids start to open a little bit, because then they start to be able to, because we don't do case studies.
Okay.
The study we talk about is you in your workplace right now.
Excellent.
You're your own lab.
Excellent and scary.
Well, there is always a bit of intrepidation, but this is the part about a learning community. Everybody's here for the same reason.
Exactly.
And so that's the part where we create the support, and we really work that in. That's why there's unlimited executive coaching for a year, so there's all one-on-one, but you're also in smaller learning groups, and then you have the larger cohort. So there's layers of support, and I try to do our best to get people in with similar workplace contexts. So depending on what they're focusing on, we try and work out a smaller group that might have similar challenges. And that way they're in it together. Okay. And even more. For example, by permission of these guys, the last program we had, that's just actually winding up tonight. We have our final call with them tonight. This one part of the group, there were 3 guys all north of 50 years of age. One had sold shares, and one was in a transition, who was in the ag space and was actually transitioning career-wise. For probably the last growing, and they had a similar question, like, what's next? Like, what does this look like now that I'm not the large and in charge of my business? They're in a transition out, and so they were trying to find, what that looked like, what would be meaningful, how could they figure that out? And it was just awesome. Like, you couldn't have asked for a better example of 3 people who were really having the same question, and they got to be a group together amongst a larger group to go through the program. So when they got together, they were there for, some calls we're asked to have is for hours, not for the few minutes that they're actually required on their own. And so once we get through that basic notion, the other part I point is that every single person who comes into the program has their leadership assessed. So I want to make sure I'm clear on this. It's not a personality assessment. It's not a self-assessment. You do self-assess, but you will actually get people to assess your leadership. People who know you, they will assess your leadership blindly.
Ooh.
So you don't know who they are, but the
Okay.
power of this is that it provides what I would call just basically a bucket of like a pressure wash of feedback. Because what we know is that in order to create, we so seldom understand how we show up in the world. And if people don't tell us,
Yes.
we don't know. Now, it's not perfect. There's evidence to show that sometimes feedback isn't as rigorous as it should be, but the truth is it really does work, and it's sort of the gold standard for developing leader effectiveness, and it's measured against leader effectiveness. So it's against a model, and then that is actually benchmarked to a global data set. So it's not just whether or not I think you're a good leader, it's like how I think you are, or how effective you are as a leader, rank against how everybody else thinks other people are performing. So it's relative, it's contextual, because we compete in a global environment.
Okay.
And that actually provides a lot more accuracy. It provides some sort of depth of field about, like, so how do I rank up against other people, broadly speaking, globally?
That's good to know. Yeah.
So it gives a measure. We don't overemphasize that, but I just do it to emphasize the rigor with which we go to, because that creates that what comes from that and from all the one-on-one conversations. It'll take almost 2 hours one-on-one to discuss what the results of that are individually, because that starts pointing a direction about where the focus might be for that individual to start working on. And at that point, maybe a week or two more, and then you get into residency. And residency is I would say, is far more like a training camp than it is than a classroom. Like, there are no desks or no chairs. You even come all the way out to Sydney by the Sea to watch a video. You're there practicing skills. And so a lot of the work we do, just as an example, we'll create what I would call interpersonal scrums, where we'll have an exercise where people will get together and they'll be conversing back and forth, and we make it as the subject matter very personal. So it's about describing an experience of another person right here, right now, and you're video recorded. And then we do playback as to see how this showed up, and there's always lessons to learn. And for a lot of people, they learn an awful lot about themselves and see themselves from a third-person video perspective in a way that they've probably never seen before. And there's a lot of rigor put to that. Like, it's not just for fun. I mean, we're looking for very specific things that will actually be showing up, that'll be connected to what people said in their leader assessment. There's trends, right? It's not, they're not individually separate. We give them tools to help be able to describe. Like, one of the most challenging things about all of this is that people seldom know what their own experience is, so it becomes really difficult to describe it to other people. So how can I be clear? How can I communicate with you in a way that you really know what I'm talking about if I don't really know what I'm talking about myself?
Okay.
And so people go, well, might think that is, self-evident or maybe not a problem. But even in our workshops, we'll give them an example. Think of a situation that you're struggling with right now. We give them the tool, the mat, the experience cube, and you walk your experience of what's going on and try to explain it. And for the first time, people realize there's elements of how I'm describing my experience that aren't even clear to me, much less how could I make it clear to somebody else. And that's the first time where we start realizing that there's opportunities for improvement from a communication standpoint. And we're getting really, really clear about what's happening. And so all of that, by the time they end, you get really clear about what's that plan look like, that if I were to focus on it, that over time, over the year, I'm going to hit those marks. And we get in that plan, just like a business plan, we have a personal development plan that is individually built, but then it's supported, then it's reviewed, and then it's put into action. And then we support that with the coaching and the group work for the entire year. And that's how we're driving performance.
I love this idea because I, as the CEO of my business, know that I'm the X factor. And I don't mean that to sound all high and mighty, but I know that what I don't know harms my business and my operation and my relationships with employees, right?
Well, I would say that's just by the very notion that you say that would indicate you probably have a significant level of self-awareness. What I experience is that most people don't see themselves in the problem at all. They'll present with problems and challenges, and they can see it externally, but they cannot see how they are even potentially making it worse, or even are the problem themselves in a way that they've never been able to before. And that's a very interesting process of helping people see themselves in a pattern that's going on inside of their businesses. might be family, might be an actual arm's length business, it might be sectoral. When they start seeing that, you know what, the most control I have over all of this is how I show up in it. And what if I showed up even 5 degrees different? What impact might that have? And what we know about the evidence, because all of this is quite rigorous, we know that once we sort of change how those dynamics work, everything changes. It could be that profound.
I love it. And I'm sitting here nodding my head because I've had many of these moments. I didn't tell you this. I've gone through many programs myself to develop myself for my business. And not only that, I've got a coach before, because sometimes we are just blind. So I've done a lot of this, and I'm sitting here nodding my head for those of you guys tuning in by podcast, because I realize what I didn't know and how it was holding me back in my business. So I want to go to the farmer at home.
Sure.
And really kind of play devil's advocate a little bit. This idea of coaching and leadership development is really big in mainstream corporate world, entrepreneurship. And we have brilliant farmers, right? Brilliant farmers, absolutely. But sometimes I think we do not place enough emphasis on who we are as farmers and what we know, because I'm just a farmer doing my thing. So let's say I'm sitting here watching this interview and going, well, how is this going to affect me? What's my pain points I'm feeling? Relationships. And I'm throwing you on the hot seat here, but
sure.
Farmers.
Initially resistant, but I think it's only, I think the dirty say that they don't have a choice.
Okay.
Because if they don't, their competitors are.
Okay.
Flat out. What I know is that in a lot of places, the complexity of agriculture, it used to be where the joke used to be that people used to get into farming so they didn't have to deal with people.
Yes.
But the complexity of what's going on is that that's not the case, and that how I handle myself, whether I'm with people or not, is a significant driver. And it's not just I put that out without evidence. There's just all sorts of evidence. That's why CEOs turnover, and why they're so broadly announced, and why it's so important when CEOs change, and it can change stock prices.
Yeah,
because we know the impact that individual has. Like, they are the singular impact about how they control the levers and how they interact with other people drives so much of the performance. It's not just we think it is, we know it is. And so we even talk about this in the program, because it's an actual very pretty simple concept called triangulation. Oftentimes people will have difficulties and they'll go to talk to someone. Invariably, they always talk to the wrong person. They don't talk to the actual person that they need to be talking to. They talk to someone. And if you say that, you've never done that, well, then you're just simply not being honest, because we all have.
I'm laughing.
We all do it. But the point is, this has consequences, right? And in small environments and small communities, this actually is probably far more negative than even in a broader. It's like just a larger office environment. Coaching presents a professional way to have a professionally triangulated conversation, where people can come into a confidential, and someone who's certified to actually talk about a particular incident. I can support the thinking of what it is, and then prepare them to go back out and actually confront the issue in the way that it's supposed to be dealt with. Okay. As opposed to, and I'll tell you, and this is the other part I'm finding, the complexity for the people who are really switched on to this, they will openly admit that they can no longer talk to their peer group about the issues that are confronting them, because they simply don't understand.
Oh, I get that. I don't talk to anybody about.
I can't. They just I try, and and they don't get what they need.
Yeah.
And so, and then by need, I mean is that they either can't understand it as complexity, or it's not in a time sensitive way that they need it. And that is the part about accessing professional executive coaching, because oftentimes what it does is it supports someone to go into a very complex conversation that might be with an accountant, it might be with your lawyer, it might be with your agronomist, it might be all of them put together in some sort of a meeting, and it prepares their thinking so that they can show up and lead that conversation in a way that's in the best interest, because ultimately they're the ones paying the bill.
many of you guys, I have this spidey sense for what the guys and gals are thinking out there. And probably because I've been that person in my own business and in our farm as well. Some of them are probably going, leadership, who cares? You know what, honestly, I'm busy on the farm. I want to get more production. I want to make more money. All these soft skills, fluffy stuff, really what's in it for me? So the reason I bring people like you with these ideas onto the show is because I know what these ideas have done for me and growing Farm Marketer, my business. What I didn't know used to harm me, right? Until I got in that space of learning, leadership, development, coaching. I thought I had it all, right?
Sure.
I was getting these results, I was doing good. And same with farmers out there. They might be going, oh, I have a nice farm operation, I'm growing. How does this stuff really help farmers?
And I think you've hit the nail on the head about like where the choice point about whether this matters or not. And so a couple things I can say to that. The first is, until every person almost sometimes will even go into the program on a bit of a leap of faith.
Okay.
And what will happen is that at a certain point it will become uniquely and individually clear about what it really matters. And when that happens, it's an all in.
Okay.
I would simply say this is that we know what the research says about these so-called soft skills, and what it comes right down is that they're not soft at all.
No.
This is actually, this idea, and this is actually goes right to the hardcore of farming. Working hard, smart, and having a particular technical brilliance on any particular aspect, or even in farming, even generalist aspect. What the research is saying globally is that these are basically entry-level skills. This is what's expected. It's not a differentiator.
Yeah.
And what drives above that are what have been in the past called soft skills, but they're not soft because we can absolutely measure them now. And they come to this idea about being able to get results, but thinking in layers of systems, not just about what's good for me today, but what's good for my farm 5 years from now, and how does this line up with what, with my participation in a larger global value chain. How can I actually interact and get and achieve stuff relationally? In other words, not just through my direct efforts, but through other people. How can I achieve something that matters? And that actually matters to them too, and to drive that relationship and actually be responsible for maintaining it. And the idea of contracting and continually recontracting with that person to make sure that everybody's getting what they need out of it and it's actually delivering results. Those are the major drivers that determine. And when we ignore those things, often what happens is that there's enormous stakes at risk. So, to be truthful, there's lots of books written about this. Like, for example, let's just think of the highest level up. Steve Jobs. He was fired from his own business for what would be very accurate, we described it as low leader effectiveness skills. Brilliant, super worked hard, super imaginative, had the entire vision. And when his vision and his gripping on hard onto his own dream and vision was literally getting in the way of the solvency of the business, something had to give. Now the beautiful story about that is that he came back. Yeah. He rescued it later on, but he was a very different person who showed up. Anybody who's read any of those biographies will talk about that. Those are the great books. The books that don't get written are the ones where that doesn't happen. And this is where there are significant, the opposite of that is high levels of stress, potentially even leading into mental health issues, burnout. We're talking about business, significant business setbacks to the point that they may be even irreversible or even catastrophic.
Yeah.
And in the cusp of all that, there's usually relationships that melt down, and because particularly in family farming, oftentimes the business goes, so often goes the relationship, and so there's a lot of risk and a lot at stake, and so much of that can be rectified by how we show up every single day and how we deal with whatever comes at us in a way that is completely in alignment and towards what matters most to us, and be able to do that and speak that and interact with others. And that is that is the essence of what really high leader effectiveness talks about and what we talked about in the previous podcast. Let me ask you this. If you hadn't taken the training that you've taken, and you've told me you've taken a lot, where would you be now?
Out of business?
Would you be in business?
No, I don't think so. If I was in business, we wouldn't be anywhere near what we are today. And I can say that by swearing on a Bible, honestly.
Yeah.
Just because that being willing to lead myself, right? Because
Yeah.
I lead myself. To be able to lead anybody in my life, by taking all of that training, it just gave me the skills to continue to grow, to relate better to family, friends, my staff. And at the end of the day, the leadership of myself and being able to lead others has been able to help me get people to do what I want effectively, right?
Yes. And I think the other part that comes up is that so much of what we call leader effectiveness actually describes whether or not how willing we are to hear a new idea.
That is key.
And accepting it, because and this is not only as an individual but even collectively. How many good ideas are rejected openly, and then are not taken advantage of, and that those that did were willing to see it and willing to hear it through, and then say, you know what, there might be something here, to the point where we can stay in those conversations long enough that something really, really good comes out of them. At the highest level, that's the big part, is be able to hear and to hear things that we may not even agree with. We may not even, for any number of reasons, but to stick with it long enough to create some sort of shared understanding whereby it influences, where everybody, it doesn't mean we have to come to an agreement, but it basically we can actually understand where everybody's coming from truly. And I think about that in ag. I truly think when it talks about this idea of social license in agriculture, that there's a real element here of the ability to simply listen to alternative and to opposing views and hear it right to the full end. I mean, that may not have a direct link absolutely right to the farm gate, but those are.
Well, it does.
This is the kind of level that I'm talking about. That creates the kind of mindset where all is possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to pick your brain. I'm a need answer kind of gal.
Sure.
So, and I'm also a dollars and cents kind of gal, just like any of the farm guys and gals out there. Everything we do is to make more money on our farm. So when we're looking at leadership, we might have situations on the farm that are non-production related. And I want to know if you think this falls into your domain and the program you're running. So I am the daughter on a farming operation. And this is very, very common. I have parents or in-laws that are holding the reins of that farming operation way too long. Everybody is absolutely paralyzed on how to handle this. And quite frankly, I'm the activator. I would be the one to do something, but I don't quite know where to go.
So you're describing someone who doesn't have any kind of positional authority in terms of ownership in that business, but you are related to the people who have that business.
Yep.
And as an outside person, you can see that this actually has a consequence.
Absolutely.
Not only potentially even from a business results, but certainly from a relationship standpoint.
Both. Let's take some examples here. It's wrecking the family. Okay. There's resentment. And let's say that our generation, I'm busy learning and wanting to improve the farm operation and use new varieties and technology. And I'm stereotyping here, but I have this is true. The other generation is a little more risk adverse, doesn't want to adopt that. So there's family consequences and business consequences here.
Oftentimes, I'll get this another way. I'll get calls where someone will ask me, "Can you go talk to this person in my family and straighten them out?" And so I listen quietly and I go, "Well, there's no evidence that will actually work. That you need to talk to somebody. That it's typically not a strategy." But what I do, because the person who calls or the person who takes the program is self-identified as a leader. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in positional authority or that they're the owners. Oftentimes what we talk about is getting people really clear about their experience and what they think is at risk and what they truly want to happen. And that might be a very, and from there's any number of strategies that could come forward on that. For example, it might be that if your husband is the person who's in the farm, there might be ways to support him and his leadership and how he interacts to help him see what's at risk. And there might be ways, like oftentimes, to communicate to that next generation about like where is the line of control there. Because sometimes we just allow people to get in our own lane. And we do so because we don't want to ask people to step back and over. And knowing and just basically having the courage and a way to do it, which is a big part of the program, being able to describe your experience and to do so in a way that doesn't light the other person on fire, that actually creates clarity but doesn't create offense and doesn't make, which doesn't mean that people aren't going to be, aren't going to get upset. I mean that is an occupational hazard in this. The question is to not let that be a reason not to do it.
Okay.
Because that's another part we get people comfortable with, is that leading to our full extent of our authority and to our own, what we would call our own circle of competence, our own circle of authority, requires us oftentimes to step right up to it, but not over it, and know where that line is, and to ask other people to get back over on theirs. And in that ordering of how we interact with everybody then has to reshuffle themselves inside that system. And can be very disruptive, particularly the least emotionally regulated person in that system. Not going to like it very much. It's going to cause some discomfort. But as we support them to understand that level of upset in the family is just normal, that's actually leadership in motion. And then oftentimes the sands settle. But it's to do so with compassion and to not do so out of passive aggression.
Okay.
And helping people through that. In other words, because it's not about getting other people to change. It's about making sure that I know where I need to be in all of that, and to step into that exactly as it is. And then everyone will have to move around that. They will have to adjust in some form, way or another. And oftentimes what happens, and this is to give solid research on this, is that when people actually understand the full, what people are trying, what people really want, what they're thinking, wanting, and feeling, what we realize that once people get really clear on that, 4 out of 5 of these issues actually change.
Okay.
All by themselves, without actually any form of like deep problem solving or whatever. And those are when they're in the small and the everyday. Like there has to be some semblance of functioning, but there are ways that if we just show up better in these circumstances all the time, that things actually just go better. And we actually train people to know, to say, is it better to step in now, or what happens if we just don't step into this? And the part of the training of being executive mindset is to be able to wade into consequences. We started at the beginning of this episode. Stepping into consequences, our best selves, being able to people to do that at a drop of a hat. We're going to deal with this right now in a way that's appropriate and not let it linger. And this is a part when people see that and they feel confident and they realize that it's very, very anxiety and there's high anxiety in it. But when they realize that actually it's not anywhere near as bad, it's like actually like petting the snake. You realize that it's okay.
Yeah.
People get good at it, and then you realize this works.
Well, and I think of a quote of a CEO for a large tech company, and this is kind of where I want to go with this, having that CEO mindset, that leadership mindset. A farm is a big operation, and it needs the variety of skills in leadership for ourselves, for others. But the way this CEO worded the quote, it was amazing. He said, for my business, and we can put that onto our farms, I'm not the CEO, the leader that my business needs for next year, but I will be. Is that really what this comes down to? Learning those leadership skills. And that just kind of trickles into every part of the farm operation, the people, the business, the tech, everything, right?
It is, and it's actually in the research, because when we talk about high career best performances, we talk about fulfilling what the business needs, having the skills to fill that need, and having the passion to do it. Like, in other words, it's something that I really want to do. And when those three come together, really good things happen. But when we think about family businesses over time, the businesses have different skill sets and different mind, like again, the evolution of how, just think about how the farming mindset has even changed over my career.
Absolutely.
If if my skill set doesn't follow along with that, it gets out of sync, right? And this shows up in where people don't want to, like where people's actual skill set diminish over time. They don't have the requisite skills, and we see this a lot of times in farm transitions that don't let go. And that's when you talk about not adapting, not evolving to new financial realities, new technological advantages. That's a prime example. And the other side is that you find that people just ultimately will lose interest, and this can happen in a variety of ways where people like, I don't care about so much of what I do anymore. In other words, I may not have the interest to run farm equipment like I used to. And so the question is, so what's my new role? And as I get older, this is the part where I think this works for older farmers. If I'm not the large and in charge anymore, how can I be a mentor or a coach to actually support this upcoming generation in a way that's far more supportive and actually fits more of how can I leverage my skill set, as opposed to it being the one who's having to make all these hard decisions if I'm not really stepping into the way of and making people okay with that shift and transition is a big part. Like, it's not about being awesome in a point in time. It's staying in this awesomeness through an absolute career arc.
Okay.
So it shifts over time, right? So that's why this idea of a CEO mindset and leader development is something that is relevant at all times.
Yes.
Not just a moment where I finally wrestled the brass ring away from Dad, but actually throughout. And so that's the part where, because we've had people in the program as young as 23 and all the way to 60.
Well, and it's funny that it's funny because in the corporate world, you come out of school, out of university, you're working on your leadership skills because you need that to advance to the next position, to get better in your job, to get more money.
Yeah.
And same concept here. We need to be the best leader for our farm business, for our family. It almost sounds like a 4-H pledge here for our community, our club, and our country.
Well, but I think it's that layer of systems. I mean, we could take it from that standpoint, but it actually matters. Like when you're talking about actual success and results, I would put it this way: is that it is a phenomenon where, and I'm trying to think of the right words here, but we are actually trying to do this in a manner that if we don't do these things, we're going to Peter Principle out.
Yes.
And the difference is in a business, usually means we just get shown the door.
Right.
In a farm business, that can show itself as an auction sale.
Right.
Or the generation just doesn't. And that's this idea of we have, and I think everybody, and I would say, it's very, very common that people come into this when they feel themselves getting close.
Okay.
And they feel themselves getting close to that, or they see where they want to go and they go, you know what, I think there's more I need to learn. That is another sort of, I would say, approach people have. But if we don't, that's where there's a lot of risk. And because if it feels like it was too close for comfort, that you can actually feel the heat.
Yeah.
And I think we've all had that, and it shows up in different ways, like whether it's sleepless nights or it's just we call this in coaching like stuck or spun out. We've tried everything that we know about how to confront this problem, and it's intractable. We just cannot seem to change the situation. So much of that is, there's actually solid reasons for that, but that is a real signal that there's time to sort of reach out and get some form of either coaching or actually get leader development that provides a new mindset or a new way of approaching it that can actually get it up and moving.
I love it. That's perfect right there. Getting to that sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Being the CEO and the leader that your farm needs today and tomorrow.
Yeah. And the old notion that people are going to figure it out eventually, we just know there's way better ways. Like there's actual rigor, there's actual process. We know they can get people there quicker.
Absolutely.
So.
Excellent. Well, I am so excited about your program and the fact that you guys are bringing this to agriculture. I think it'll be a game changer.
Well, we hope it is. I have a lot of passion for it. I can certainly find extra hours in the day to put in it, and it's one of those notions. I have no trouble picking up the phone and answering those phone calls when they come in, because I know it's making a significant difference.
Absolutely.
And just check out the testimonials on my website. Those are unadulterated, unmodified testimonials. So.
Okay, perfect. That's a perfect lead in then. If people want to find out more about the program, it launches in January, right?
Yeah, end of January.
End of January. If they want to find out more, how can they do that?
I would say two ways. They can just contact me, so a text will start, so 204-483-0197. All the program information is on our website, and that's leadershift.ca, so that's leader-shift.ca, and if you just look under programs, there'll be the LeaderShift program and the National Farm Leadership Program. Click either one of them, you're going to get all the information you need, and all the contact information is there. It's a one-stop.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed our time.
And I cannot wait to hear from all the farmers that go through the program and change their lives and their farming operation, because that's what it's about, right?
Yeah, it's exciting. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you guys for joining us on another episode of the Impact Farming Show. See you next week.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.